Hello and welcome to Scary Movie and a Sandwich, a show all about scary things and cozy foods with me, your host, Artem Yatsanov. On this show, every week, I pair one of my favorite sandwiches with a perfectly curated horror movie. And me and my guest, we digest and discuss the layers, the hidden meanings of both the movie and the sandwich. This week, we've got an incredible guest, an outstanding, unforgettable sandwich, and an absolute iconic movie. Our guest today is Morgane Hearth. She is a musician, a lyricist, a guitarist, a mandolinist, a spoons player like you wouldn't believe. She's also a sound engineer. She's just an all-around swamp witch in Los Angeles. Morgane Hearth is an outstanding musician, and she's got an album coming out called Cherisher. So check that out. You can follow Morgane on Instagram at Morganism. She spells her name with an E like Morgane. Morgane, Morganeism, Morganism, and Instagram. And you can also follow her work on morganism.com. Morgane Hearth, outstanding, deep, insightful, spiritual, the vibes. Thank you very much for all of the above. And our sandwich today comes from Stevie's Creole Cafe, an absolutely outstanding Cajun, New Orleans, Creole cuisine. It is incredible. Our sandwich was so perfect. Stevie, you are a genius. Stevie's Creole Cafe can be found on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles. Everybody, you gotta check out Stevie's. Thank you so much for this incredible discovery. Mwah, loved every bite. Before we get started, I'd like to thank my crew. As always, thank you for your diligent reporting to my horror correspondent, Antonia Lassar. Your scoops and your deep dives and insights on the synopsis of the horror movies are absolutely outstanding. Thank you. We couldn't do this without you. And of course, huge shout out to our artistic visionary, the mastermind behind the absolutely outstanding all original artwork for Scary Movie and a Sandwich, Luther Thompson. You two are both icons and legends, and I salute you. Thank you. And our music today comes from Liberty. Liberty, we salute you. Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Scary Movie and a Sandwich, a show for anyone who's ever been afraid or hungry. Enjoy. Welcome to Scary Movie and a Sandwich, your cozy, easy listening and easy viewing vodcast about all things scary and all things tasty. I'm your host, Artem Yatsanov. On this podcast, we digest, discuss, and dive deep into the different layers, secret messages, hidden meanings of sandwiches and scary movies. Today with me is a very exciting guest. I'm extremely excited to have her on the show. Good buddy, a real kindred spirit. She is a musician. She is a sound instrument technician. She's a lyricist and a songwriter. Just an all-around cowgirl in LA. Southern belle in Western Southern California.
Hell yeah, brother.
She's here, and she's bringing the South to the toasty West. We have with us today Morgane Hearth. Let's give a warm welcome. Hey, Morgane.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Artem.
I'm thrilled.
I've been super excited to talk about one of my favorite sandwiches. And, well, I don't know about a favorite movie, but a movie that I have seen recently.
Yeah. It's definitely a movie that both of us have witnessed very recently.
It will stay in my mind for a while, and I have a lot to say, so I'm excited to dive deep into it.
Well, so the way this podcast works is that every week we pair a different sandwich with a different unique horror movie. Typically, my guest will propose a sandwich. I will come up with a list of some scary movies to pair that sandwich with. Think of it as like a refined wine and dinner pairing, you know? And this week, I'm really excited. Morgane proposed a very special sandwich, and we both landed on a movie that we really thought really clicked. Morgane, would you do us the honors to introduce this week's pairing of movie and sandwich?
Absolutely. So this week's pairing will be the fried shrimp po' boy with the movie Dagon.
We got a little Lovecraftian. We've got a little crustacean. We've got it all.
Absolutely. I think this sandwich hits the themes of Dagon in all facets.
I'm thrilled. For those folks who have not had the pleasure to witness Dagon in all of Dagon's glory, if you want to experience Dagon in about under 5 minutes, we've got an original movie synopsis for you now. Hey there, Scary Sammies! It is time for the synopsis. And for this section, we have our special horror correspondent. She is a world-famous comedian, a record-breaking hiker, a writer, the love of my life, Antonia Lassar. Besides being brilliant and perfect, Antonia hates horror movies. So she has not seen this movie. She has not seen Dagon, and she's not read the synopsis for Dagon. So she's coming into this fresh, and this is going to be a completely objective synopsis of Dagon. I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, please welcome Antonia Lassar.
Hey, sandwiches, it's me, Antonia, the best part of the episode. Honestly, let's just cancel the rest, am I right? Hire me. I'm incredible. Okay, we're here to talk about another movie that I hate. How do I know I hate it? I just know! Today's movie, all I was told was water. Cool. I know that thing. All right, the title is Dagon. Great, love the title. Let's learn about the movie. I bet it sucks. Dagon, based on H.P. Lovecraft's stories. Oh, that's the guy who did he's got the
Tentacles?
the tentacles.
Cthulhu.
Are there going to be tentacles in this?
There
might be tentacles in this. Based on H.P. Lovecraft stories, The Shadow over Innsmouth and Dagon, it follows Paul Marsh, a young businessman, and his girlfriend, Babala. Sorry. You know that there's a TikTok trend of these two German guys doing a rap about someone named Barbara. I think I'm so sorry, I've ruined your podcast. Back to Dagon. Paul Marsh, a young businessman. I'm so sorry. Okay. Pull together. Paul Marsh and his girlfriend Barbara, Babua, are on a boating trip off the coast of Spain. Glamorous. After a sudden storm, their boat crashes near a desolate coastal village called Imboca. Paul and Barbara, along with another couple, Vicky and Howard, seek help in the eerie village. Ooh, eerie. As Paul explores the area, he notices the townspeople's strange fish-like features, okay, and soon discovers they're part of a monstrous cult worshipping an ancient sea deity called Dagon. Honestly, I kind of love this. The villagers have been transformed into amphibious creatures due to a pact made with Dagon generations ago in exchange for wealth and prosperity. Oh my God. I mean, I love this. They're half fish in exchange for money? I'd do it. Okay, as Paul tries to survive, he learns more about the sinister secrets of Imboca. Barbara is captured by the villagers, and dragged into the depths, while Paul is pursued by the increasingly grotesque townsfolk whose mutations worsen the closer they are to fully becoming sea creatures. Oh no, this sounds gross. This sounds gross.
So close. I thought you were almost into it.
I'm still kind of into the whole, I'll become a fish in exchange for money and power. What would it be like to be becoming a fish? You're sort of like, I think it would be kind of hot. I mean, I keep imagining myself as a hot fish, but like scales, cute. Gills, cute. I don't know. Shiny, very cute. Except they're monstrous beings, according to you. That's too bad. Throughout the film, Paul experiences visions of Ushia, a beautiful and mysterious woman who appears to have a hypnotic hold over him. Okay, very cult leader. What is this? What is this going to be about? I do love a mystery. So, who is this beautiful, mysterious woman? When Paul finally encounters Ushia in person, she reveals that she's both a high priestess of Dagon and the daughter of the ancient sea god. Cool. Ushia claims Paul is destined to join her because he's also a descendant of Dagon. What? Implying they are bound by blood. Ushia's seductive allure and Paul's strange connections to her complicate his efforts to escape, as he is both repulsed by and drawn to her. Ooh, okay, sea god incest. That's crazy.
That's right.
No, this is crazy. Very Love is Blind. Underwater. In the film's climactic final sequence, Paul is captured and brought before Ushia and the cult for a ritual sacrifice. They're gonna kill him? I thought, okay. Barbara Babua is killed in a horrifying scene, and Ushia declares that Paul's true nature is meant to align with Dagon. Rather than succumb to the horror, Paul sets himself on fire in a desperate attempt to reject the fate being forced upon him. Fire, water, opposites, elements. Very beautiful, very poetic. However, in a tragic twist, Paul survives. uh-oh. And as he collapses into the ocean, his body begins to undergo the same transformation as the villagers. In the film's haunting final moments, Paul grows gills. Accepting his monstrous heritage as he plunges into the water to join Dagon and Ushia. Okay, I have so many questions. So why don't we want to become a fish person who worships this monstrous god? Is Dagon just like a fucked up guy? Like, is he scary all the time? Like, why aren't we into this?
Great question. I have some reading material for you. Have you heard of our Lord and Savior, Dagon?
Are you a priestess? I've been wondering about the gills. I'm ready for my gills. Do it. Wow, what a great movie. I've had the time of my life. Enjoy your Sammies. Enjoy your scaries. Aren't I the best? Bye.
Whoa, that was really cool. Thanks for tuning into that. So now it's time for our sandwich synopsis. Our sandwich today, beautiful fried shrimp po' boy, comes from Stevie's Creole Cafe on Pico Boulevard. Morgan, give us that beautiful little pitch from Google.
Yes, I am just delighted to read this. This is incredible. Stevie's Creole Cafe is a snug, unfussy cafe with few tables for Creole eats such as gumbo and po' boys, plus peach cobbler.
Oh my gosh.
That is like a warm hug from like your Louisiana grandmother.
I feel like as soon as we finish this sandwich, we should just go get another sandwich.
Absolutely. Support Stevie's.
Honestly.
An incredible sandwich artisan, an incredible copywriter.
Stevie, you're really doing it.
Stevie is firing on all cylinders today.
We've got a little clip here of us first busting open these beautiful sandwiches and taking a bite into them. Let's give the folks a little more thorough discussion of this sandwich before we go into our main bulk of the show, before we get into the pairing. Let's take a bite.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I've been waiting for this all day.
Woo!
We're already sufficiently sauced and fried up.
Sauced and fried up.
Sauced and fried up.
Sauced and fried up. I've been saucing for a shrimp like you.
Praise be to Dagon.
Praise be to Dagon.
You know, this is going to inextricably marry po' boys to H.P. Lovecraft's Dagon for me. I'm never going to be able to eat another po' boy without.
Honestly, I feel like considering that H.P. Lovecraft is such a racist, this is such a good reclamation.
This is good. Yes, this actually is really good.
Okay, Morgan, let's tell the folks what's happening at home. Okay.
This is just spectacular.
It's far out. We got here is a fluffy, soft, supple bun, a long roll, and it's stuffed with these like crispy, crunchy, really plump and juicy shrimps. The shrimps are seasoned gorgeously
To perfection.
I think, yeah, they're done like with a lot of class, because I feel like sometimes you can take a shrimp and just dust the shit out of it with all sorts of seasoning. And this is like really sensible and also just tastes really good.
Yeah. Sauce is really good. It's got some kick to it. Honestly, it tastes a lot like the po' boys that I've had back home.
Okay, so I'm really excited that you picked the po' boy, because I feel like you have a more personal connection to po' boys. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with po' boys?
Absolutely. So the po' boy originates from Louisiana, which is not where I'm from. I'm from South Georgia, though, and so po' boys are really big in the South. And basically any port town, any town that specializes in seafood. So for me in Georgia, that would have been like Brunswick or St. Simon's Island or Savannah even. There's going to be some real good po' boys there made with fresh caught seafood. And so the origin of the po' boy, as I understand it, so disclaimer, I'm not an expert.
Morgan's a doctor.
Read an article.
An anthropologist. She's the smartest person I know.
I have a degree in sandwichology. The po' boy, as I understand it, came into the culinary lexicon during the early 20th century. In South Louisiana in the 20th century, the early 20th century, there was a lot of cultural exchange going on between a lot of the poor and impoverished folks down south. So you had poor white Americans, poor black Americans, poor Cajun and Creole folks that all have their own culinary traditions.
Okay.
These are all coming together to form the po' boy.
You know, as they say, it takes a village to raise a po' boy.
It does. It does. And so we get the French roll from the Cajun Creole influences, and then everything inside of it really comes more from the labor movement at the time. So before the unions for like coal mining and construction went around, a lot of these folks that were doing this manual labor were poor and impoverished. So they would go to their local bakeries, their local cafes to try to get some food, and all they could afford, all that they could get from these restaurant owners was a cheap loaf of French bread with whatever the like refuse cuts of meat were. So they had like the giblets, I don't know a lot about meat, but like the worst parts. The stuff that doesn't go to like the rich fancy restaurants. They would just fry that up and heap that on there with like cheap lettuce and then just like drown it in some kind of sauce. That was what they could afford. That was what they got. And the term came from a dialecticization of the words poor boy. So they would say, give this sandwich to that poor boy over there. And when people with their regional accents, it ended up sounding like po' boy. Give that sandwich to that po' boy. There's also some evidence that the term was used ironically because the union members were actually among the highest paid members of society, or members of the laborers. So once the unions gained success, it was like a joke to say, oh, this is for the po' boy, because he's not a po' boy. He's a wealthy boy now that he has a union.
Morgan, that's an amazing background and history on the po' boy. I love that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I read one article.
Listen, you really undersold how vast your doctorate in sandwichology goes. It's a broad education you have.
All it takes is one article, and you can have a doctorate in like just about anything.
All it takes is one.
All it takes is one.
Wow. Okay, so we now know a lot about the po' boy. We know a lot about this movie. I think it's time for us to share with folks our feelings and our thoughts. So without further ado, let's take us into the Scary Movie in a Sandwich patented Tasty Chats. Morgan, got some questions, some discussion topics for you.
Yes.
So just to kind of ease us into what the shrimp, po' boy, and Dagon are all about, how did this movie or this story, because it's based on H.P. Lovecraft's Dagon, how did this movie or this story appear in your life? And then, I guess, how did this sandwich appear in your life?
So, I'll start with the movie, or the story, rather. I have, for a few years, been, like, a big fan of Lovecraftian fiction, which I feel like I'll get this out of the way now so that we can continue talking about Lovecraft unencumbered. Let's put a giant asterisk next to fan of Lovecraft. Like, we're a fan of the mythos that Lovecraft created. He has some of the most abysmal views on social politics and race and gender and everything. Even for his time, he was uniquely racist. He was uniquely bad. So let's not let that fly under the radar.
Yeah.
But
yeah, not to pardon or excuse or in any way lessen the amount of shittiness that this person is.
Yeah.
Boy, could he really write some tentacled beasts.
Boy, could he. And he has a lot of proteges that are significantly less problematic who are carrying on his mythos and his work. And I really like the universe that he created and his proteges kind of expanded. So I found out about Lovecraft's work through the video game Darkest Dungeon, which it's based on a lot of Lovecraft stories. So as I got more into that video game, I started reading or listening to Lovecraft's short stories because they were on YouTube. You can find them narrated by one of the titular voice actors from Darkest Dungeon. It's really cool. His name is Wayne June. Shout out Wayne. But so I listened to Dagon because that was one of the most recommended ones that I found.
And it's short. It's a quickie.
Yeah, Dagon is short. And so when you sent me the list of movies and I saw Dagon on there, I didn't know that they made a movie of it. I had no idea. So I was like, yeah, let's do that one.
So funny because my relationship with Lovecraft is kind of mixed because I don't think I've ever really read anything fully of Lovecraft, but I've been just so familiar with like a lot of the mythos too, but mostly because of tabletop role-playing games.
Right.
Play a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, and there's a class called the Warlock, and you get to pick a patron who gives you your magical powers, and one of the patrons you can pick is like the old ones, or but it's like these creatures from the far realm. And like I've always loved this idea of these alien entities that like defy reality. I also love this idea of the unexplainable, the far realms, And also I like the concept of how in a lot of like in video games and in fantasy fiction, there are really specific rules that are set. How here's how the magic works, here's the technology works. And I like how Lovecraftian type of things, these sort of like, what are they called in Dungeons and Dragons that are called aberrations? They sort of like come in and they sort of just like warp reality. So it's like the rules don't make any sense anymore, and it's like pure chaos, like total madness. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and he reflects that in both the intangible themes of his work, where he talks about like, oh yeah, this being is just not of reality, and in the tangible aspects of his work. So in literal descriptions of like things like walls, things that are tangible, he spends a great deal of time in his writings talking about how non-Euclidean the angles are, and like this wall is just fucked up, dude. Like it it does not follow any like Euclidean geometric rules. And so I really appreciate how his work uses confusion and the inability of the human mind to process things, the limits of the human brain to process things outside of our purview is really a crux of his type of fictional horror.
Oh, it's so fascinating. My nephew and I just recently watched another Lovecraftian movie based on, I guess, at the Mountains of Madness. It's called In the Mouth of Madness.
Oh, they made a movie out of that?
It's like
I'm reading that one right now.
It's like loosely, I think it's like loosely, or more, it's like more like a spiritually like inspired by it, but it's called In the Mouth of Madness, and it's a little, it's
okay.
I mean, it's, from what I understand, it's very different. But the thing that we were then watching, like a lot of making offs, and like I've been listening to some podcasts that also talk about how like filmmakers are always like hesitant to make Lovecraftian things because it's like his whole thing is describing the undescribable. How do we capture that? And it's just so funny to imagine like it's somebody in the movie trying to capture a scene of someone looking at a non-Euclidean wall and just be like, it's just a dude staring at a wall for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not flat, but it should be flat.
Yeah.
I don't get it. It's can that be captivating?
That is a good point, because it's like the whole thing that makes Lovecraftian fiction appealing is the fact that like the human brain cannot process it, so the written word can only go so far. But when you take another medium, you take the visual medium, like that is infinitely more illustrative of what's actually happening in the story than the written medium.
Pictures worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, so you can't show pictures of stuff that like can't be looked at. Like,
yeah, yeah. Don't look at it. Just use your imagination. Some things in this movie where giving us the visual does a lot to aid kind of like the sort of mayhem of things, and then other times withholding detail even further does that. What's your take? What's the movie about?
In a very Lovecraftian way, it's about a god's indifference towards humanity. This guy does not care. This guy being Dagon, does not care. He just wants, worship, and he wants to have his children, and he wants his children to come live deep in his lair, which you find out is in the ocean, and they will live forevermore. They will become deep ones, which is as they're referred to in The Shadow over Innsmouth and Dagon, the actual stories.
You had mentioned that you had some parallels that you were drawing between the po' boy, and does this kind of feed into it, the indifference?
Well, okay, so the movie, I think, there's a sequence at the end where the protagonist's girlfriend, Barbara, is being lowered into a pit so that Dagon can breed with her and have her...
So scientific.
There's this big scene where they're chanting, Ia, Ia, Cthulhu, Fatagan, Ia, Ia, Cthulhu, Fatagan. It's actually kind of goes in. I'm probably going to sample that.
Yeah.
But... there's this big scene, and they're wearing their skin masks, and they're lowering her in, and the protagonist comes in with like a jar of gasoline, and he's pouring it all over the Imbokans. He's setting them on fire, and then throughout this whole sequence you find out that one of the main Imbokans is actually his father. It's like a whole Return of the Jedi situation, because you find out that like the priestess that he's been dreaming about and who he almost hooked up with is also his sister. And she says... And
they have a lot of sexual tension.
Extreme. And you think, oh, they won't address this directly. It's just going to be like a weird thing, like in Return of the Jedi. But no, she says one of the most important lines in the movie, which I believe is, "You are my brother, and now you will be my lover."
Yeah, quintessential, pivotal line of this movie.
And so all of this excess on top of the actual story, because basically nothing that I just said is what happens in the actual story, reminds me of the po' boy.
Okay.
In that the po' boy just has everything they could find in the kitchen. It is a very campy sandwich. It's over the top in the best way possible. And I think Dagon is a very campy movie. And it's best enjoyed with the understanding that, like, it is, as you said before, like, it starts at an 8 and it stays at an 8 for the whole time. And then there's a brief spike to, like, an 11. Yeah. And it gets back to an 8.
Yes.
It is it's just a never-ending hurdle through event after event after event.
Totally. And I love that you, by the way, I love this parallel with like the po' boy. I mean, I also think that it is a campy sandwich. And I love that you bring that up because it's a very it's a very campy movie, and I actually had like a lot of thoughts about how there's a lot of slapstick in this movie. There's a lot of slapstick married with camp in this movie, and then there's just like a lot of grotesque things. And it's interesting how those things sort of like work with one another. Like in the slapstick category, there's a lot of physical comedy. There's the way the creatures hobble around, who are like half human, half fish people, and they in some ways they are meant to be disturbing, but a lot of because there's so many of these scenes where it's just a whole town square and it's always raining, so they're all in these like, you know, fisherman slickers, and they're all hobbling around, and there's so many of them that it kind of becomes just a bit comical, because you're just seeing so many people, and you know that they're actors all doing their weird little hobble, and so that to me was a little like very slapsticky. I think a lot of the facial expressions that they have these people doing are really funny. They've got
Absolutely.
There's like this like hotel clerk who's just deadpans the entire time. There's a really silly guards person that's like guarding like the door to this house, and when our protagonist sneaks out, there's just a kind of like a doy what, and then like he gets like bonked in the head, and then he gets kicked in the crotch, and it's like and his reactions are very like, oh boy, what? Oh, this is happening again.
It's like if you put that scene with like some Hanna-Barbera music under it.
Yeah, totally.
Even that character looked really similar to the zombie character in the second live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Are you familiar with Monsters Unleashed?
No, but I love that. That's what it reminds you of. Tell me about him.
I mean, he's just like a zombie character, but it's Scooby-Doo, so it's goofy, it's campy.
Yeah.
And I felt that way about this movie too, which is why the juxtapositions between that and like unbelievable like bleak violence.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa! Like,
yeah, it's such a weird mishmash. It is such a, I think, faithful adaptation of this kind of like style of like, you know, sci-fi horror or whatever, or fantasy. The campiness is like everything is big costumes, big choices. Everybody has extreme reactions, and I mean the costumes.
Was acting like she had bills to pay, like, and that she was just, the woman who got like maimed on the boat was like shrieking for her life despite having maybe 6 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, really ate it up. Yeah. I think what you said was really dead on. Like, when you take those elements and you have this jarring violence, you see somebody's face gets just completely peeled off of their head. You know?
Yeah.
We've got people with like these really pretty fucked up disfigurations, weird tentacle fingers. That's a big one. Just a lot of people who have just like tentacles for limbs, and the way they appear and the way we see them. There's like these elements of like sensuality married with like, oh, but you have gills, and like your lower half of your body is like a weird octopus mermaid like thing, and it's like, it's just like a lot of it just makes you kind of go, ugh. What's your take on this kind of stuff, like this genre of movie? Because I really love what you're saying, that you have to take it with like a grain of salt, or just accept that like some shit's gonna be a little funny.
If you're looking for the type of desolate bleakness that Lovecraft writes about, I don't think you'll necessarily find it in this movie. As we were discussing earlier, Lovecraft's fiction hinges on the unexplainable and the unnameable and the unspeakable, and you can't really convey those concepts in a visual audio media, because you have to see things and hear things in order for the medium to work at all.
Right.
So you're not going to get that. But the story, the plot, and everything is actually really faithful to The Shadow over Innsmouth. And like the lore of Dagon and everything is super faithful to the story. But I think you have to watch it as though like this is going to be over the top. It's like a Lovecraftian plot, but with like Scream-esque penchant for almost comically overblown violence.
And then sometimes it's just there's like random jokes. Like our main character beats someone with a cell phone and goes, I gotta get a bigger cell phone.
Yeah, like
what?
There's one point where like he notices that there is a town-wide manhunt coming after him in his hotel room, and they know where he is. Mm-hmm. And his response is to take out his screwdriver and take the lock off the bathroom and put it on his door. And of course, it doesn't hold.
This is the thing that I thought was so wild about this movie. Like, the pace of this movie, to me, was one of the things that really contributed to the experience. Because it just felt like one thing floated to the next. Everything started the same amount of importance. I have to say, the main hero, this is the other thing that makes the movie a bit jarring. I didn't like him at all.
Yeah, no, he was
so
not
annoying.
likable.
like just so frustrating.
His whole thing, and he probably repeated this like 10 times throughout the movie. He would say, two possibilities.
Two possibilities.
Because he's super like logistic, and he's really into like coding, and he sees everything as a binary. He explains this like at the beginning, which their whole conversation at the beginning was all stuff that like you would know about a person after having dated them. Like you would know his penchant for binaries. You would know that his mom is Spanish but doesn't let him speak Spanish. But it's weird that he tells his girlfriend that.
This little moment with him speaking Spanish, well, I on the second time reviewing it, I kind of had an observation about the idea of like fate and destiny and like the grand design, which I feel like I was actually really curious to talk to you about it because you come from a religious background. And you've spent some time in communities that worship and stuff, So to me, it made me think a lot about the commentary that maybe Lovecraftian work has on faith and the purpose of spirituality, and the purpose of religion and devotion and all this stuff.
Well, the entire movement of the plot is aligned with the idea of predestination. Because the whole time, especially near the end, our hero, Paul, is getting visions of who you'll later find out is his sister, this kind of half octopus, half beautiful woman with razor sharp teeth.
Incest trigger warnings.
Yeah, for real.
For real.
But she keeps saying, this is your destiny. And no matter what he does, he tries to burn down their church. He kills several of them.
Relatively easily, if I may say.
Absolutely.
Right, which also made me feel like, dude, you're like, okay, let's just for the sake of argument, if they had cast The Rock to be this dude, you'd be like, yeah, The Rock could probably just toss everybody in this town. But this guy's like, this guy's a little like Herb. He's like
he's a coder.
Weakling. He's a coder, yeah.
Why does he have so much gumption? Like the second that shit hits the fan, he goes into killer mode. Like there's this one scene where it's him against 3 guys and he's got 2 knives in his hands and he's like, come at me, motherfucker. And it's like, where did he get that from?
It's just pure white male privilege.
Absolutely.
He's high on that privilege. So he's destined. He tries to burn the village down. He tries to burn the people down, kills a couple of them.
And once he realizes that one of the kind of the patriarch of the town, the guy who is most transformed into a squid, but is staying for some reason that you don't find out until the end. When you find out that reason is that the hero is his son, and he keeps being told, like, this is your destiny, like, you gotta come be with Dagon. And he tries to kill himself by burning himself alive with the last of the gasoline. And even then, when he's pushed, I don't know, like 10 stories into water, he's horribly disfigured from the burning. He's drowning.
That was pretty intense, I have to say.
Absolutely.
And I didn't expect, again, one of these things you're just like, Jesus, they just did that?
Jesus, they just showed that?
Yeah. If you've ever been curious about what like fresh third degree burns look like underwater, this movie will satisfy your curiosity.
Absolutely. And so once all of this happens, he's been through so much. He's done so much to try to avert this fate. Everything he possibly can. He sprouts gills when he's in the water. Mm-hmm. So at this very moment, his fate and becoming one of these immortal deep ones and joining Ushia, going to be a part of Dagon's congregation in the sea, is sealed.
Yeah.
So you realize that everything that happened, from the storm to the shipwreck to the screws jangling loose to meeting Ezekiel to everything, was predestined.
Yeah. It is lovely the way you put that, because it has a quality of a grander story, a grand design. Yeah. And that to me feels very in line with sort of religious imagery and religious sort of like stories. Like you know, like you think about all these like big stories, you know, Jews walked for 40 years through the desert, that kind of thing, you know, or like Jesus knew that one of his disciples was going to like betray him.
Right.
And like, this is like an interesting thing is like, if this guy knew that his destiny was to go back to his mother's like hometown or something, because the establishing thing is we're underwater, he's in a scuba diving suit, he discovers the opening to this interesting shape, this massive, interesting cave underwater, which has the symbol of the esoteric quarter of Dagon. And so at first you're like, whoa, we've got some deep sea exploration. He's like feeling around the walls of this cavernous opening, discovers that the walls are just lined with gold. And suddenly there's somebody there in the water with him. It's like this mermaid creature who then has like rows and rows of shark teeth, and suddenly he wakes up and he's been having a dream.
And it's a dream. So you don't even know if he is a scuba diver.
Yeah.
You don't know if he knows anything about undersea exploration because it was all a dream. And it's never addressed what his actual business is. You just know that he's ultra wealthy.
Here's my hot take.
Yeah.
So in the morning when he wakes up and they have this, him and his girlfriend Barbara have this really lovely scene where we get a lot of exposition and he sort of shades her when she's trying to get sexy with him, and then because she's annoyed with his behavior, she throws his laptop in the water.
Right. He's too focused on work. He's not enjoying himself enough. I better cause thousands of dollars worth of property damage.
Here's my hot take.
Yeah.
I think he's just predestined to get his laptop back. I think in the end, Uche's like, come with me, brother. I'll find your
laptop.
So you can continue to trade stocks as part of the defaults. No, but seriously, folks, I just wasn't sure if like his career was also in some kind of aquatic thing. I was also really curious about what your take on a lot of these kind of cryptic messages that mostly Ushia had. There's this really kind of stark scene where she's like looking our main character right in the eyes, and he's looking back at her, and he's gone completely like stone cold. Like he's just sort of like quietly crying, and she's like, we're going to be together. There's not going to be any tomorrow. There's not going to be yesterday. There's only going to be the forever and forever. And I thought it was like a really interesting commentary on like maybe predestination and faith, because it sort of had this idea of like, we have everything laid out in front of us. We just need to sort of trust the path, and we just do this.
Yeah.
You know? And he like retorts her and says, no, this is just a crazy coincidence. And she's like, you dreamt of me. And he's like, that's just, you know, it's just a dream. And then she goes, every dream is a wish. And then I thought like that also an interesting communion with something higher, you know, that it's almost like you pray while you sleep, and then your prayers are sometimes heard or something, you know? Yeah. What are your thoughts on these like interesting, like almost like metaphoric messages? These, I don't know, what do they mean to you? Like these philosophical little turns of phrase and stuff.
It's an interesting wording when she says there will be no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. What she's really saying is you won't have to make any more decisions. Like, you will no longer have to bear the hardships of humanity because you'll be immortal.
That's an interesting way to look at immortality. Is when you're mortal, you have to deal with caring.
Right, because you'll die someday.
Right,
so
right.
you better deal with it now.
But also then, why do we care about the past? What does the past mean as mortals?
Right. Something to learn from. Philosophy of immortality, of every dream is a wish. I thought that aspect of it, so the fact that he dreams about her,
Yeah.
the fact that this dream is indicative of a future that will become a reality.
Yes.
All of this is very Lovecraftian. Dreams are a central motif in Lovecraftian fiction.
Okay.
It's this idea that there are some people who are more sensitive to the cosmic waves being emitted by these huge deities. So in his most famous short story, The Call of Cthulhu, one of the turning points is when the protagonist, who's like a researcher, archaeologist, meets somebody who is quote-unquote sensitive to these types of dreams, to these types of cosmic eldritch waves that are being emitted by Cthulhu, that are giving him visions of these giant non-Euclidean towers. The geometry is fucked up. he's giving him visions of all these squid creatures and stuff like that. That is a central motif in Lovecraft, and I think of it as a perversion of belief specifically within the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. The idea of predestination, of fate as inescapable no matter what you do. Most of the time, well, all of the time in Lovecraftian fiction, this is not a good thing. Like, if you have a if you have a fate, you better hope that it's not sealed.
It's really funny.
Because if your shit is sealed, you are gonna go be a fish person. Like, there's pretty much no way around.
Isn't that the definition of fate? That it is just a closed circuit, you know?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. That also ties into like cosmic indifference. Well,
yeah.
Dagon is not concerned. Dagon isn't really trifling around in the affairs of humans much. Actually, the fact that he has to breed with human women is not a part of the story. In the actual Lovecraft stories, the Eldritch deities don't really interact with the human world because it's a closed circuit, because their fates are already sealed, because they're being controlled by forces so powerful and beyond the scope of their imagination that they could not possibly hope to resist them.
Gotcha. Wow. So like, as far as like Lovecraftian deities, these like Cthulhu and the other deep
other
gods,
guys,
the other guys, they sort of are like, humans are a waste of time.
Our lives in the eyes of these eldritch deities, it's not just like how we think of ants. It's how we think of like electrons within atoms, within amoebas on ants.
Yeah,
You know, like, it's just not anything we ever think about or ever think about any individual one being significant in any way.
We don't consider it.
It's a scale we don't have the capacity to imagine as humans.
Wow, that's such a stark and jarring like view of like a god that thinks so little of you.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's the big parallel, or that's the big not parallel, but like perpendicularism. That's the big...
Keep it on Euclidean, please, Morgan. If you could.
That's the big perversion of the Catholic or Christian idea of a God who cares for every individual, despite being omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing. Lovecraft says, well, if there is a God who truly is that omnipotent, omniscient, like, who's truly that grand of scale, why would humans be of any concern to this God?
It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah.
We're like, it's like this deity is all knowing. This deity is like incredible, has like limitless potential for what they can do. They can unmake worlds. And like, cool. Why would this deity give a shit about us, who literally could still step in a rusty nail and that'll be the end of us?
And that,
you know?
Yeah, I think that Lovecraft actually asks some important questions about what the motivation of a God that's omnipotent and all-knowing and all-present would be.
What the motivations of an all-knowing God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would this person truly be concerned with an individual? We know, of course, that it has the capacity to focus on one individual and hear the prayers of one individual. Of course it has the capacity to, but does it want to?
Yeah.
When there's so much else to be considered within the grand scale of the universe and all other life forms that might be in the universe.
It's interesting to me because this is the territory where I always kind of feel like, when I think about religion and my own spirituality and how like probably less attuned I am to a religious form of spirituality. I think I am much more curious about things that like I think that ghosts are real, and like I wonder if I could like encounter one sometime, you know. But what I was gonna say is that it makes me think about the concept of misinterpretation of religion, right? Like just like the idea that we as humans, we're the ones who wrote the Bible, we're the ones who wrote the Torah, we're the ones who wrote the Quran. Like these are allegedly words that were passed down from God, but the idea is I think they were still passed down from a deity up on high into a mortal brain, and that mortal brain then wrote. It wasn't verbatim. Right. It would have been this brain trying to process and trying to write down and make sense of something. So you read it almost from like the inception of like, again, this is my very limited knowledge of it, but for me it always seemed like from the inception of like holy text being written, they're already being skewed because they're they're being interpreted by people who are not of as high intelligence
Exactly.
as a god, you know?
So the word of God is subject to the biases and the
Right.
filter of human limitations that the prophet has when they're writing down the words, when they're distributing the messages.
It seems a big motif in maybe Lovecraft overall, but it's particularly in this movie, is like the idea of transformation. You know, you've got people who are becoming something else, you know, this idea of like something overtaking a person, the idea of like marrying a person with another quality, because a lot of these people are turning into these like fish, crustacean, tentacled beings, you know, shrimp people, if you will. Just a shout out to our shrimp boy, you know. It is kind of interesting to me because it seems that maybe Lovecraft or this movie saying that worship of any kind perverts natural order. So in a sort of to demonstrate that, he's sort of saying, for example, what if you had this group of people who worshipped a fish god? What if they believed that this is what could happen? And what if this fish god was doing this because these people were believing that this fish god meant to bring them to a higher parallel to heaven? It's
Right.
going to become a deep one with Dagon. They just need to allow Dagon to procreate with them, and so they can become one with Dagon. What I love that the people who are communicating, who are actually able to communicate, although there's one priest who's pretty intense, but everyone is very clear and headstrong in their beliefs. Nobody's being like, I'm not crazy, you're crazy. People are like, you don't know about Dagon.
Yeah, they're like,
Dagon
this
is
is just
great.
the truth.
This is the truth. This was going to be great. And particularly the actress who's playing Ushia, that whole character is just like so like passionate about.
Yeah, she's never angry with,
She's like,
with
no,
Paul.
it's like Dagon's gonna be great.
It's like, dude, you don't get it. Like, you'll get it soon.
Yeah.
But she talks to him the way that you talk to like a 4-year-old who
Yeah.
just doesn't understand like what's
like,
going on.
Hey, you're upset. I get it.
I understand. It's okay. But like,
Fuck Dagon.
you'll
And she
understand-
goes, yes, exactly.
for context, there's one point where Ushi is trying to sell Paul Marsh, our hero, on allowing his girlfriend to be impregnated by Dagon, and Paul says, "Fuck Dagon," and Ushi says, "Yes, exactly. You're getting it. Yes, and their children will be beautiful."
Yep.
Okay, I was looking up the place where Dagon resides.
Okay.
He resides in the sunken city of Ugothanok, and I was interested in your depiction of Ugothanok as like a heaven, and the parallelism that can be seen in Dagon demanding all of these behaviors and all these sacrifices and everything of his followers so that they may go live with him in Ugothanok.
Right.
But in looking this up, I found out that Dagon is actually a real world deity worshipped in Mesopotamia, particularly in present-day Syria. He appears in the Hebrew Bible as a leading god of the Philistines, notably in Judges 16, where Samson brings down the temple of Dagon, where he's being held captive. So Dagon is actually not fully a creation of Lovecraft's imagination. It's a deity that's thousands of years old, who was connected with fertility or grain. And so the depiction of Dagon in the Hebrew Bible is, well, it's because the name Dagon is similar to the Hebrew word dag for fish, or dag. And that led to Dagon being depicted as kind of half man, half fish.
Oh, how interesting. Ooh, that's very cool.
Juicy.
It's very
Much like
juicy.
this delicious sandwich.
Yeah, that's right. Ooh, there's a lot to like kind of unpack about just like the different things that are sort of stuffed inside this movie. And there's a lot.
Much like this lettuce is. Oh wait, were you about to make
Yep,
that?
yeah, go on
No,
there,
no,
go
you
on.
go ahead. You got it. You got it.
Much like the pickles and the lettuces
The lettuces.
and the tomato
Yeah.
and the mayo and
Yeah.
this little chipotle spicy sauce, or maybe is it a Cajun sauce?
It's Cajun sauce.
Hell
Yes.
yeah.
Delicious.
It's so good. Perversion, transformation, and misinterpretation of, or not necessarily misinterpretation, made me think about like, yeah, if you wanted to kind of make the argument that like religion is ridiculous, you could show somebody Dagon and go like, is this crazy? But is this different from like religious persecution, you know, or somebody
Exactly.
persecuting somebody of a different faith? And you're like, no, I guess this just sort of kind of, if you believe that something is going to save the world, anybody who doesn't believe that thing in your mind will compute as someone who's trying to like end the world and is like your enemy. And of course you're gonna, act in defense.
Yes. And I'm not trying to be crass here, but do you know the only difference between the type of zealotry displayed by the Order of Dagon and Christian zealots today is that the Order of Dagon has tangible real-world proof that their deity is real and is giving them these rewards and is sending his children to come live with him in this heaven-like city of Ugothanok.
Wow.
So the parallels don't paint a great picture of religion. That's Lovecraft's whole thing is perversion of the sacred, bastardization of the sacrosanct. Give me a thesaurus, I'll say the same thing a third time.
Hell yeah. Talk about the sacrosanct.
Sacrosanct. And I don't think it gives the whole picture. I mean, of course, we're not trying to come on here and say, yep, because we watch Dagon, everybody's got to stop being religious, because this is ridiculous. But I think it paints a really important and necessary to hear picture of what happens when religious zealotry reaches a critical point.
Right. Yeah, because I think, if I may take a stab at that, when religious zealotry meets a critical point, it either becomes a massive global religious movement, and it just becomes mainstream, and it no longer feels like zealotry, it just seems less like the status quo, or it gets vehemently combated against and maybe brought down,
Yeah, in which case it becomes more and more insular. Its followers become more and more isolated, much like the remote island town of Imboka/Innsmouth. Mm-hmm. And we call those cults.
Yeah.
One of the most valuable things that a teacher's ever told me, a religious studies professor when I was in college, every religion started as a cult.
Right.
Every religion began as this collection of people with this totally crazy, for the time, assortment of ideas. Like when Christianity came out, when Christianity dropped, people were like, what? No, there's never been a human son of God. What? No, this is crazy. This is like insane religious zealotry to think of this. But through numerous historical and social circumstances that are beyond the scope of Scary Movie and a Sandwich, Christianity is now the dominant religion.
Nope. This is all this podcast is now dedicated to examining the roots of religion. That's it. We're hard pivot. This is now a faith podcast. Faith and a sandwich.
Sacrosanct and a sandwich.
For every Christianity cult that broke through, became a real pop star,
hit the mainstream.
There are 1,000 other one-hit wonders that just didn't go far,
Didn't make it out of Atlanta.
That's right. You know something interesting? In Ukrainian, the term for a pagan god is Yezichnia or Yezicheskia. Yezichnia, but literally means gods of the tongue. But the tongue, the word for language and the word for tongue is the same word.
Like in Spanish.
Yeah, lingua, right?
Lingua, yeah.
Lingua. It seems to me like maybe the suggestion is like it's pre-copied down religions,
right.
But I just like that it's this, because I don't really know what pagan means, but it's interesting that in another language there's a very specific term used for like that religion was something different before you wrote it down.
Yeah, once you had holy texts, you could standardize the beliefs of a religion.
Yeah.
And that's what made it able to amass followers. That's what made modern day Abrahamic religions, and also other like ancient Egyptian mythology, because they could write on like hieroglyphs, stuff like that. Yeah. Once you're able to standardize and write down tenets or beliefs of your religion, it can spread significantly further. Mm-hmm. And what we call paganism, that term paganism is a little bit of a misnomer because it homogenizes pagan religions. Pagan just means, as far as I know, religions outside of the order of like actually popular religions. Right. So like Christianity, Judaism. Yeah. And it's particularly religions that center around animals or the earth.
Indie. Or it's an indie religion.
It's an indie religion, yes. Pagan religions are not homogenous, and they're not like all one thing. It's a bunch of different cults that haven't broken into the mainstream of religious consciousness.
Right, but they all have really different faith systems and really different ideals and different tenets. But once you use the term pagan, so like,
it's like, oh, they're pagans. So you got your Christians, you got your Muslims, and now over here there's the pagans. But it's like they don't all have one central belief system. They're all
and it makes it harder for someone who's of a pagan faith to like to explain why they believe that way.
Right.
You know, our community is like this, and this is what we've done for generations, and we've got this big old church that we pray at. Like, you know, it's just it's so smaller. It feels like there's a larger group of people who could contradict or criticize their views, and there's less people who could then back up that this is the correct approach to, like, you know, a faith.
Yeah, it's like, dude, how could this be the correct approach when you only have like 1,000 followers and we have like 15 million followers?
Exactly.
What's going on with that?
Yes.
It's like just the law of numbers. It's mob rule.
I think the movie just hinges on a weird place that's weird for weird circumstances. Because those people could have been weird from different things. It could have been a parable about, you know, climate change and like pollution. They could have been all like mutants. It could have been like a story about ancient history, that maybe there's this island where there was another species that was trying to survive, and it's a species of these sort of like mermaid people, you know, but they've been so ostracized by society that they've shunned themselves away, you know. And of course they have different cultural approaches, you know, this idea of like when people colonize other like cultures and stuff, and you know, but it ended up being more about religion. But I think, more to your point earlier on, the movie became much more about fate, this like predestination.
Absolutely. I think fate is the main theme, but you brought up ostracization for this hypothetical like mermaid people, and I think that's interesting and important to bring up too, because a main theme, I want to like sneak this last theme in there.
Let's get in there.
One of the main themes of Lovecraft's work, and I don't even know if he understood this on a conscious level, is that which is different, that which is outside, that which is not understood by you already, is to be feared because it's dangerous. So this lines up pretty well with his social beliefs, with his beliefs about race and gender and foreigners and people of different religions. Like, he hated all of that.
Woof.
Because to him, and this is reflected in all of his work, the quote-unquote outside world is something to be feared. Those who are different from yourself, those who live differently from yourself, who look differently from yourself, they have only bad intentions, and they are praying to dark gods, and they're doing all these like nasty rituals.
Yeah.
And
who knows what they could be doing?
Who knows what they could be
doing?
doing?
What if they're doing this? What if they want to put tentacles in your body?
Exactly.
What if their walls just don't make sense, man?
What if these people have fucked up walls? How can we trust them? Yeah, so he's taking his anxieties about his, you know, xenophobic, sexist, racist anxieties and extrapolating them into a fictional science fiction realm.
That's another hot take. It's someone experiencing a completely fucked up society. A society, this is wrong. This is the way not to do it. Everything here is wrong and messed up. And if you come here, you will become corrupted by it as well. That's also an interesting a concept, just communities as corrupting forces. You know, the idea that there's a good community and then there's a bad community. The bad communities can have really negative influences on the good communities.
Yes, there's really clear lines between them, and everybody knows who's who, and you can tell who's at a glance. That's important in Lovecraftian mythology. Yeah,
the ones that have tentacles drooping all over them, bad. Don't do what they do.
Yeah.
I did want to, because I feel like we've hit a lot of really good stuff, and I feel like we're getting a little bit closer towards the end of this beautiful deep dive.
I love that you keep using deep dive, because I'm imagining the ending scene where they do the deep dive into the Dagon pit, and it's like, that's what we're doing. Our Ugothanok is the shrimp po' boy and the topic of this discussion.
I love that. That is our...
This is our heaven.
This is our heaven. Look at you still savoring that gorgeous, gorgeous sandwich. Way to go. Y'all gotta get yourself some of this Stevie's Creole Cafe. Stevie.
Stevie.
You know what you're doing. So I did want to just chat with you about the vibe of this film. Because I found that was one of the more effective things about this movie. I actually thought that everybody being at an energy 8 tilt kind of was a vibe in this movie.
Definitely.
That everything was stressful. And I think that they do a good job of like setting the stakes are really high at first. And the stakes are kind of like catastrophic. Like their boat crashes and one of them is trapped in the boat. Like, yeah, everybody's going to be in a bad mood from here on out, you know?
Yeah. And it only gets worse.
Yes.
And from that moment forward, everyone is in a state of maddening stress. Very Lovecraftian.
And there are so many little elements that I think really add to it. One of the big ones for me is that everybody is always wet, cold. There's just constantly walking through puddles of water in houses. Like, the accommodations and the hotels are like so grody.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Mold and refuse.
Rusty everything. And the thing that I thought was really effective is, except for a few random scenes, there's no score. Through most of the movie, it's just
very little
natural.
music.
It's just natural sound. It's unnerving when you realize, when you're sitting in that sort of like silence, but not silence, but when you're sitting in just natural sound for a while, it starts to creep under your skin. It feels a little too, it made me kind of feel like anything could jump out at any moment, you know? So it just sort of kept at this sort of tension consistent. Whereas I feel like sometimes music can really help you figure out what to prepare for, how to feel, can like take you out of a moment and calm you down, will get you ready to go to a higher peak. So in some ways it just sort of felt, you felt clammy watching the movie. You know?
Yeah, I felt clammy. And that's
Yeah.
a good point that you bring up because, yeah, I do feel that way about like film scores. They kind of guide you in how you're supposed to feel. But in Dagon, there's so little scoring that you're left in open water. You don't know. You like that?
What?
You like that one?
I love that.
You're left in open water. Yeah, you're left in just a state of like constant alarm.
Yeah.
You're constantly on guard. Something could jump out at any moment. Something could happen at any moment. And that is very in keeping with the vibe that Lovecraft wanted to create in his stories. It was just like, there's so much fucked up stuff happening right now. And it's so esoteric and incomprehensible that like your very sanity is just at its mercy.
Listening to the audio narrated story of Dagon was really interesting how many times the choice to explain something as many things that are just will be too hard to explain. And I witnessed things that are just too uncomfortable to think about. There's so much of a character expressing how they feel about something that they don't understand. People just reacting and just being like, I don't want to think about it. I don't even know how to explain it. That doesn't make any sense. And I don't even know how to describe it. Incomprehensible. That is really, it's compelling because it asks you as the reader to use your imagination, to think about, my God, what would be something that I couldn't define, that I couldn't understand what I'm looking at.
And that's a thrilling exercise
to
have a reader engage in throughout the entire story.
Yeah. I think this movie does a good job of creating a vibe that does a similar thing for the imagination. It's in little subtle things too, or obvious things, but actually have a lot of nuance. Like, for example, the clerk at the hotel, who they just choose to not give any lines to. And so he just stares at people and you don't know, does he understand what's being said to him? And the more you sort of understand the world of it, you're like, oh, is he like much more fish than human now and just doesn't understand human speech? Or is he fully faking it? You know, like it's cool because it kind of makes you wonder like what's going on.
Yeah.
But yet we're in a visual medium and it's good that they're still able to do that. That being said, there's a lot of design in this movie. There's a lot of things that are very visual. We've got pelts made out of human skin. We've got human flesh suits. We've got people wearing flesh masks.
A lot of skin.
A lot of skin.
Earlier.
We got lady with gills and boobies and tentacles, and we see it all, and it's really wild, and there's not much left to the imagination at all. But I will say this, that I think the po' boy is even further a good compliment to this movie, because when I think of po' boy, I think of like jazz music, a big band, very lively music, something that's like very celebratory, something that's like obviously joyful, whereas this movie has like a lot of like dubious, murky, you know, vague grimness.
But the through line is chaos.
Yeah.
The po' boy, when you mentioned jazz, I was like, yeah, it's just like unpredictable. It's unpredictable, chaotic music. And this movie is an unpredictable, chaotic movie. I think it's really funny how, like, so the movie is set in Spain. A not insignificant portion of the dialogue is in Spanish, and there are no subtitles.
Yeah.
So they were like, you have to be bilingual or choke. Like, some of this stuff is, like, kind of important. But also, our main character, the unlikable two possibilities Paul Marsh, does this really cool and fun thing where when he meets people who don't understand English, he just speaks English louder and more slowly. And the people he's talking to are like, oh yeah, sé que quieres. Like, I know exactly what you want. Yeah, totally.
As a non-native English speaker, it's 100% effective 100% of the time.
Absolutely.
When someone talks louder to me, slower, I get it.
When I met Artem, he didn't speak a word of English. And we met in that coffee shop, and
it's less than a year ago, honestly, and
I just said things really loudly and slowly. And suddenly
we cleared out that coffee house.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up by one of my favorite sections of the show, which is Best Bite, Best Fright. This movie, I feel like, had some jarring moments. So if there wasn't anything necessarily specifically frightening, it could just be an exciting sequence that will stick with you. And then in a similar way, pick the best bite of this beautiful po' boy from Stevie's Creole Cafe.
I think the best fright was right at the end when Paul tries to self-immolate. He's knocked into the water by Ushia. And you think, well, you kind of predict it because of what he's just been told. But when he starts to grow gills, that's when it snaps for the viewer, like, oh, his fate is sealed. There's no getting out of this. He has to do this now. He can't die. He's now immortal. And that, to me, was a more frightening concept than anything else that happened in the film. Even that one guy getting, like, flayed alive with no music and full showing.
Yeah,
like,
a lot of grunting.
Wow, that was rough. But once I saw those gills pop up, I was like I got chills. I was like, oh, he's here now. He can't leave.
Oh,
this is just what he is now. And the best bite, I feel like the first bite of this po' boy was excellent because if you have a totally bland palate or a totally like cleansed palate, whatever, and take the first bite into this orchestra
symphony.
Yeah, this is like a super pretentious food podcast now.
This podcast contains multitudes.
When you take the first bite into the sandwich that has so much into it, you just have like such a colorful mosaic of flavors. You have your seafood, you have your sauce and the spice and the French bread. It's like, oh, yes, yes. Final scene, first bite.
Oh, I love that. I think for me, I feel like I have two slightly frightening moments that I thought were just really captivating. I also have to say the ending. For me, the shock of seeing his burnt face underwater was really, really unexpected. I thought that was quite gross. The other moment, and it's like much smaller, much more subtle, like towards the very beginning when the priest that they think is like helping them out tells Barbara to go use the phone at the hotel. And he points to the hotel with his hand, and Barbara notices his webbed fingers, and it's just so, and they just look so gross and so weird. We instantly, as the viewers, click into like, things are gonna be like not okay at the hotel.
This is not gonna be like Barbara has a normal time at the hotel. The movie, that's not what's happening here.
Yeah. Barbara's about to have a no good, very bad day. And with this beautiful shrimpy po' boy, the whole thing was just so delicious. I think I like my second bite was the best. The first was me kind of breaking through to get to an equa ratioed out area of the sandwich where I was getting pickle, tomato, lettuce, full bite of a shrimp that I could, sometimes when I bite a shrimp sandwich, I want one bite to cut through half of a shrimp.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You don't want a whole shrimp in your mouth.
I love a whole shrimp in my mouth, but it's more that I want to extend the experience of the sandwich. So I want to go half shrimp at a time. And when you're starting with the half, at the half mark of a sandwich, right? You get the cut. Right. It's just because it's all kind of falling out. You're like, listen, I'll take what I can get in my mouth. The second bite is measured. That's where you're getting exactly what you're looking for. And that's my best bites and my best bites.
Yeah, anything I can get in my mouth. That's what I don't take that out of context.
In context, always.
Artem, it has been just a delight,
Morgan,
talking with you about everything that you can wrap your mouth around.
Oh my God. And boy, howdy, how many things we wrapped our mouths around today.
Wow.
Morgan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You're an amazing guest. Love chatting with you about everything. This is such a great choice. I'm so glad we got to check out Stevie's Creole Cafe.
Stevie's Creole Cafe.
Way to go. Stevie really knocked it out.
We sing your praises. You are even better than 2001's Dagon.
That's right. You are vastly better than the 2001's Dagon, which we found very enjoyable. So, Stevie, this is a huge compliment.
Absolutely.
Morgan, before we sign off, anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to recommend to folks? Do you have any projects, any music coming out soon?
Actually, yes. I just finished editing my album.
What? Okay, great.
It is bluegrass with a very kind of like progressive and jazz kind of twist. So it's a lot of like tight string work, stuff like that. And I take a lot of influence from my swampy upbringing in South Georgia. So maybe a little bit of connection to Dagon and the whole wet wonderland that they have there.
That's right, yeah.
But my upcoming album is called Cherisher. It's under my name, Morgane Hearth. And you can follow that album at my Instagram, which is at Morganism, Morganeism, and my website, which is morganism.com.
Incredible. Morgan's upcoming album, Cherisher. Super cool. Morgan, congrats. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
So cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have you on the Scary Movie and a Sandwich podcast. This is Artem and Morgan signing off. Tune in next time. And until then, stay scared and stay hungry.
Ia, Cthulhu, Fatagan. Ia, Cthulhu, Fatagan. Ia, Cthulhu, Fatagan.